So a couple of videos ago, I introduced to you the Lixada V-shaped wood stove. Well, since that time, I have made a few more observations on the stove and a couple of modifications. If you're interested in seeing what I discovered, stay tuned. Okay, since I've introduced the stove to you a few videos ago, a couple of things that came to light. First off, and this was picked up by a number of viewers, and one of the things they noticed from their personal experience either with the Lixada V stove or the original 180 tack VL stove is the reason why 180 tack is no longer making this stove is that it had a problem with ventilation and airflow through the stove. And what appeared to be the issue is that if you're using a rather large size pot, that if you placed it too close to the front or it was big enough to cover the entire area, it would cover off airflow from entering here and then exiting through the top area back here. Now, if you have the pot further back on the two braces, it didn't seem to be much of an issue, and when I used it last with a fire in it, it didn't seem to bother too much. I did notice, however, that if I moved the pot forward, it did start to restrict airflow. So that's one of the things I took to light, and a couple of viewers made comments such as drilling some additional holes like these in the side. I took a slightly different tack, and I'll show you what I've done. I decided to cut notches out of both sides. So these are little rectangular notches, slanted sides on them. Used my Dremel tool to do so, just made a little paper template and traced it on and then cut them out with the Dremel tool. And I have the notches on both sides. So what that allows me to do is two things. It does help to address the airflow, and hopefully we can see this from the side here. Address the airflow, because now if I have a large pot, airflow is not restricted from exiting through here. So it should improve airflow with a wood fire inside of it. It still leaves the front apex as a pot support, so I have that, the crossbar, and this other crossbar as pot supports for large pots. So the other thing that I think it'll probably do for me is allow me to use larger sticks. And I mentioned that's one of the things I liked about this was that you can feed sticks in from the end, but now I should be able to feed them in from this way as well. See if I can just find some here on the forest floor. I can't have a fire today, by the way. We're under a full fire ban here in Nova Scotia, not surprising given the weather and the lack of humidity. Yeah, it's very dry and no rain, sunshine, strong winds. It's just a recipe for a forest fire, so I'm not going to take the chance. So you could feed sticks in through here as well, even with a pot on top. You could continue to feed sticks in from either end, and having them up at a little bit of an angle should help with the fire as well. So that's the modification that I made to it that I think will improve it for use, especially with wood. Now, the other thing that people were interested in knowing was about using it with a Trangia or other alcohol stove. Well, I have one of my Trangia knockoffs with me today, and in fact that's what I am going to be using to make my lunch. And I did some measurements, and let's see if I can turn this so that you can see the alcohol stove does fit in there nicely. And what I discovered is that with the braces in this position, and I'll show you what I mean by that, because there are two positions for these braces I've discovered. From the top of the jets to the top of the pot stands is 1 7/8 inches. So it is not quite in that sweet spot. It's a little taller than you would normally want, but I don't find that too much of an issue. I have tried it, and the flame does work very well, and it does heat up quite quickly. If you are concerned about it that being too high, a standoff from the pot, you can always take your lid, put the lid in, which stands a little over 1/2 inch tall, and now we're much closer to the 1 inch sweet spot to the top of the bars. So that's one way you could use the alcohol stove with this Lixada V stove very effectively. The other way, it's an option I want to point out, but it may not be something that you may want to do. I'll take the cross stand pieces off. I'm only going to insert one of them, but I discovered that rather than going over the top, the cross pieces will also fit inside as well. Now, if I put the alcohol stove in, and I want you to imagine that I have, well, maybe I can get them in quickly here. There. Both bars in. Now the standoff from the top of the jets on the Trangia knockoff to the top of the crossbars is 7/8 of an inch. So just about 1 inch, just short of 1 inch. So that may not be a bad standoff in use. It might also give it the benefit of having a little bit of a windscreen around the outside edge. Now, will it work with this pot? It's a little bit narrow for this pot to work. Doesn't quite fit in as deeply as I would like it to, but maybe a smaller one like a GSI cup or one of the Pathfinder cups, or even a military GI canteen cup. They should all fit in there quite well. But I think I'm probably going to use it with the pot stands across the top as they're intended to be, and yeah, I think it works pretty good. You'll also notice that I made a new tray out of aluminum flashing. I'll just move this aside for a second. This was done very easy. A pair of tin snips. I did use a Dremel tool to cut a slot in, just a pair of tin snips, and I have a little tray that is reminiscent of the one that you can buy from 180 Tack. I don't know how long this will last with an actual fire. I will have to wait until the fire ban is off before I can give it a try. And if this doesn't sustain, or if this lasts, great. If it doesn't work out, well, then I have some sheet steel that I can go and make one. That may be one of the few downsides of this little stove setup, is that especially in the woods like I'm using it now without a rock base underneath it, you do have to have something on the ground to protect the ground from scorching or even from going into the duff and the root systems underneath. All right, let's wrap this video up. Okay, just a quick update on my Lixada V stove. I still haven't had it long enough for a real long-term review on it. I want to build a number more fires in this and see how my modifications have worked to improve the airflow through it. But I did want to bring it to you and show you what I've done with it in terms of modifications and how it can be used with an alcohol stove, and that's how I'm going to use it today to make my lunches, with an alcohol stove. And then I'll continue to use it when I go out in the woods, and eventually I'll have enough experience I'll be able to bring it back and give you a more long-term review. But until that time, get out and explore, take that path less traveled. It'll make all the difference. Bye for now.